the Highway Patrol. So I don't know which one of you want to start it out here. I don't have an agenda per se, but. Thank you, sir. Merle.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Merle Riedel. I'm Executive Officer with the Kansas Highway Patrol. Thanks for giving us this opportunity today. We do have this opportunity to review the Salina Campus Needs Assessment. So this assessment was produced pursuant to House Bill 2551, which was passed during the 2024 legislative session, which directed us to do an assessment of KHP assets in Salina. That assessment was submitted to the committee, but the consultants are available here today to present the findings of this assessment in person. So, Mr. Chairman, we have a principal analyst with Clark Enerson Design. His name is Rick Wise and is available to present to the committee. And then I'm available to follow up with some agency comments.
Sure. Welcome to the committee, and to the rest of the committee. There's lunch being delivered, but it's a little bit late, but they'll be getting here pretty soon here. So, welcome.
Well, thank you. Rick Wise, Clark and Anderson. Happy to be here today. Excited to present our findings of the assessment that we completed. Online, we do also have a representative with our partner on this who will be presenting as well. For part of the presentation. So this is the agenda of what we're going to talk about. We'll talk a little bit about the team, our timeline for this effort, the programming effort that Jonathan will talk about, facilities assessment, all the facilities that we looked at, several different planning scenarios that we considered, the sites that were also considered, and then final recommendations. So the study team internally is a combination of Clark and Anderson, a design firm in Kansas City, and then Dewberry, a public safety planning team that we partnered with this. Jonathan Tallman is on the line. He'll be presenting for part of this. But you can see we had mechanical engineers, electrical engineers, landscape architects, all part of this process. In addition to our internal team, externally, the executive sponsor team included both Kansas Highway Patrol personnel, including Colonel Smith, who is here today, as well as Sherry Mackey, and Barb Schilling with facilities property management were also engaged. And then as we started this process, we met with numerous people representing KHP, their facilities, and you can see that list representing the different troops that we met with, and spent lots of time, obviously, with Merle as part of this process. So our timeline. So we started this process in September. We had an initial kickoff meeting on September 4th to set goals and objectives for this process, to clearly understand what we wanted to look at as part of the study. We came back on the 16th and 17th and went through a programming process, which Jonathan will talk about here in a second. Generally, it's to determine the long-term space needs for KHP in their Salina facilities. In October, we came back again in Salina and toured all of the facilities to determine their condition, suitability for long-term use. We developed a review document in November. The final document was prepared by the end of the year, and obviously we're here in front of you today presenting our findings. As I go through this, stop me if you have any questions as well. So I think, Jonathan, you're going to take over?
Yes, thank you. Again, my name is Jonathan Tallman. I'm principal with Dewberry and subject matter expert. And so for the Kansas Highway Patrol, we started our process. I lost the presentation. Thank you. For the Kansas Highway Patrol, we started with staff interviews, as Rick had earlier mentioned, where we met with various members of the different troops, really, and their staff, really to get an understanding of how does each of the troops use their space and what are the conditions of those spaces. So not only did we start with interviews, but we also walked with staff through their spaces. And we're really recording and measuring and trying to do our best job of understanding what is the task of each of the troops and what are those spaces that they're currently using. And then having conversations about what could you use to make your job better or to do your job better or improve your current workflow. Next slide, please. So we met with, of course, Troop J, M, N, C, and S, walk through, as I said before, all of their existing spaces, looking at the storage needs. How does fitness work and operate for the Kansas Highway Patrol? What's that process of giving out uniforms for trainees, and really getting a deep understanding of process and workflow throughout the campus. Next slide. But as we're also looking through everything and talking with staff about how the space is used, we're also looking at, how is that space size right now, and does it actually work for that program that's happening within, say, an office or a storage room or gun cleaning, or equipment handout and distribution. Next slide. And so we identified a bunch of different needs throughout the facility, but some of the highlights here are, a demand for more training classrooms, and not just the training classroom space itself, but also the technology within those classrooms needs to be addressed and updated as well in every existing classroom. Those training needs are evolving year over year, and that need is definitely apparent. Dormitories need to be definitely modernized. They're outdated. They don't meet any of the ADA requirements that are today, nor do they meet current demographic challenges, especially with the showers and the restrooms. So there's definitely a need there for improvement there. The driving course, there's an existing one that is on IDOT property. It's a little bit of disrepair, it needs some updating, but the desire to drive at a high speed is not possible right now on that driving course. So how can that driver's course either be redesigned or modified to reach high speed driving and keep those trainees safe? Demand for increased parking on training days. The parking situation at the Marymount campus is sometimes adequate. I would say most days is adequate, but on certain days it's definitely inadequate and needing to sometimes bus people in, or even have a bus from the lower parking lot to bus people up the hill to the graduation auditorium. So that's an expense that the patrol doesn't really need to be worried about. High demand for increased storage across all troops. That's a very common theme that we saw within each of these troops and facilities. Also, the dispatch center, I think that is really high concern for us, and we believe it should be a concern as well for you. Right now, it is in an existing facility that was never designed to be a dispatch center. So that there's a significant life safety issue with that facility, but also incorporated in that is that it is undersized. It doesn't have proper layout. Talk over mics from one workstation to another is definitely a high probability, and the office spaces there are just very, very small. You can see an example of what they're working with on the bottom right-hand picture and the bottom left-hand picture, just to give you an example of their space in Troop M. And then we developed multiple iterations for all of these concepts for the needs for the Kansas Highway Patrol. And our final program shows, of course, a 25-year space requirement for the Kansas Highway Patrol. Next slide. So we also looked at the operational facility efficiency, of the Kansas Highway Patrol. Currently is spread out across Salina into 4 different locations, which takes time away from travel time, reduce the amount of hours that is possible for training for in-service or recruits. Okay. And we also produced a overall program. Again, this was reviewed with the Kansas Highway Patrol. We do a detailed room-by-room summary of the spaces in requirements of office spaces, the size of a classroom, entries. We even look at, how many stairs might be in that new building and things like that, along with some notes and requirements of those spaces from our conversations with each troop. And what we found is existing square footage on the Salina campus and the three other locations. The existing square footage is right around 188,000 square feet. However, the projected need for the Kansas Highway Patrol is 375,000 square feet. The existing land currently used is 60 acres, and the projected need, and this would be an all-in need for everything, would be a 187-acre site.
Thanks, Jonathan. So next we're going to go through the facilities assessment. Again, like I said, we walked all the buildings and determined their condition, again, looking at mechanical systems, electrical systems, and general compatibility of that building for long-term use. Some of the general findings: lack of perimeter security around the Marymount College campus. Someone can drive right up to it. There is no perimeter security in that location. It's located on a hill, and that creates a lot of accessibility challenges, both within buildings as well as between buildings for individuals that need to traverse between those facilities. Again, mechanical electrical systems, as we reviewed them, are in need of enhancement or replacement. The campus has been well maintained. We don't want to minimize what that the facilities have been well maintained, but the facilities are also aging out and in need of additional mechanical electrical systems upgrade. And generally, we just found that the facilities are undersized to accommodate the long-term needs of KHP for their both their facilities as well as for their teaching needs for the training academy. And then lastly, the dispatch center also being undersized, not being in a storm-proof facility. If a storm were to hit that facility, it would take that facility down, has that potential, which is problematic. So we went through a scoring analysis for each of the buildings, and you can see all of the elements that we looked at as we scored them. And we used a scoring range of 1 to 4. 1 being the lowest, 4 being the highest. 1 obviously being in need of major replacement or renovation, and 4 being excellent. And we developed composite scores for each of the buildings. As we went through that analysis, you can see the summary to the right. Only 1 building scored in a 3 to 4 range, and that's the Central Evidence Facility. It is only a few years old. Obviously, we'd expect it to be in good condition, but the remainder were not at that 3 to 4 range. There was 1 facility, this is both the driving course as well as the driving course building, that is just above 2. The building can be expanded to and renovated to accommodate its long-term need. The biggest issue with the driving course is that it's about a 1-mile course. We're projecting a need of a minimum of a 3-mile course for the driving course. And then, as you can see, the remaining buildings all scored below 2, meaning they're in major need of renovation or replacement. So, to address what we found in our assessment, we developed several planning scenarios for consideration. Again, the existing campus and facilities, 188,000 square feet, 4 different sites, and those sites totaling about 60 acres of land. From the information that Jonathan provided, programmatically almost need to double the amount of square footage for facilities to 375,000 square feet, and then site area, as you'll see in a second, a minimum of 60 acres and up to 187 acres to accommodate the long-term needs. So first option that we looked at, we're calling the full reconfiguration on new campus. Again, it would accommodate everything. Everything would relocate to this new campus. And you can see with a total project cost of $443, almost $444 million. And that is the full cost for that effort. And as you can see on the bottom, sort of what happens with all of the existing facilities. The Marymount College campus could be sold, and then the existing use agreements that you have with, or that KHP has with KDOT, the Highway Commission could be vacated, and then the lease with the Salina Airport Authority could be vacated. So some pros are, so basically, again, all of the elements that we looked at would relocate to a new campus, and you can see them in the column to the left. Pros associated with this option is that it consolidates everything onto one location. It's not spread out across Salina as they currently exist, which would improve operational efficiency. You wouldn't have that time of driving between facilities. It vacates any existing lease space, and it allows for the sale of the Marymount College campus.
I ask a quick question.
Sure, May.
Back on the selling of the Marymount, do you have an approximate value, what you think that'd go for?
Mr. Chairman, Merle Riedel, Executive Officer for the Highway Patrol. Statute requires that when conducting an appraisal on these properties that at least 3 appraisals be conducted. So, so we have not, there has been no appraisal recently conducted. We know that that property, when we purchased it in the 1990s, we purchased it for $5 million. A kind of a general research of some real estate sites indicate it may have a value of $8 million, but those would be unsubstantiated numbers until we could get an actual appraisal.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Cons associated with this one is obviously it has the highest first cost. This is diagrammatically what a singular campus might look like if all of the elements were relocated to one land area. Again, all the elements fitting on there. And as you can see, a large portion of this is occupied by the driving course. It's most of the land area required. Option 2 is a little bit different. Says that we need a little bit less square footage, land area wise, a little bit less square footage for buildings, at a cost of about $416.7 or $6 million. Under this option, again, we would propose the sale of the Marymount College campus. However, we would maintain the current location for that we occupy for the Department of Transportation, the Highway Commission, and then again, we'd vacate the lease with the Salina Airport Authority. With this option, again, the new campus would contain all of Troop J, Troop C, Troop M, Troop S, and Central Supply. However, the firearms range would maintain its current location, and Central Evidence would also maintain its current location. Again, this consolidates many of the programs in one location, which would improve efficiency from where they sit today. It does vacate some of the existing lease space, and that it again allows for the sale of the Marymount College campus. Some cons is that there is a little bit of inefficiency with maintaining those other satellite locations. And then it does maintain the current firearms range in its current location, again, remote from the rest of the facilities, and maintains Central Evidence in a remote location. Again, this is just diagrammatically what that might look like. Again, the only things not shown here is Central Evidence and the firearms range. Everything else is shown in this scenario. Option 3 says we're total square footage, 346,000 square feet, 60 acres, which is basically the acreage that you occupy today, or that KHP occupies today, at a cost of $327.2 million. Under this scenario, again, you would maintain the Marymount College campus, you would maintain Kansas Department of Transportation facilities, you would maintain the Kansas Highway Commission facility. The only lease you're vacating or eliminating is the Salina Airport Authority. Under this option, again, you keep current locations. Some pros associated with this one is that we would propose relocation of all new facilities on the Marymount College campus, and we'll show that in a second. It does vacate the Salina Airport Authority lease, requires no additional land acquisition, and again, it's a lower first cost than the first two. Cons associated with this one are really tied to inefficiency with having 3 locations. So under this scenario, what we'd propose is that the Marymount College campus would be completely rebuilt. It would require phasing. In this image, all the existing facilities are to the right. There's some land area to the left that we feel we could build everything for the training academy, gymnasium, Troop M, and Troop C on this campus. It would require phasing, which would extend the duration of time required to build out this option. With this option, we would add additional fencing to address some of our concerns regarding that. Option 4 is sort of fix what you have. Again, under this scenario, 188,000 square feet, this one does not accommodate the 25-year need. It sort of fixes what you have at a cost of $116.4 million. Under this scenario, we still would recommend eliminating the Salina Airport Authority lease and relocate Troop S to this campus. Pros, obviously, lowest first cost, and then it gets rid of that lease associated with the Salina Airport Authority. Cons is that it really does not meet the 25-year need. It just sort of fixes, again, what you have on those existing facilities. And this is just a diagram showing what that might look like. Again, it's just the existing facilities, and all of them would require major renovation. So in summary, regarding the 4 options, this is just a snapshot of all 4 of them. The first 3 do meet the long-term need, programmatic need for Kansas Highway Patrol. Option 4 does not. So we were also asked to look at sites. We looked at 8 potential sites for what a new campus might look like or where it could go in and around Salina. And you can see those address or those facilities and where they are around Salina. We went through a process of objectively looking at each of them, and these are the criteria that we looked at to analyze each site. And we also had scoring associated with each of these criteria, and you can see the scoring, what they represent. We also looked at the weighting of each of the criteria. Through that process, we generally determined there were 3 sites that had the highest score. The KSU Salina location, the Kansas National Guard's option B, and then a singular site, site D, the Waterwell site. These are the 3 sites, and as you can see, they vary in size. Site A, the KSU Salina site, is about 72 acres. Of that, only about 30 is available for this potential option. Kansas National Guard, 16 acres, and then the largest, which would accommodate everything, is the Waterwell site. So, what are the recommendations? Again, these are the 4 options that we looked at. We believe that option 2 makes the most sense. It accommodates many of the things that we're trying to achieve with completely updating facilities, replacing facilities, getting most of them in close proximity to improve efficiency. And it has middle-of-the-road costs associated with the project. So again, this one, option 2, addresses the 25-year need, consolidates most of the functions on a new campus. It does maintain the existing firearms range and central evidence facilities in their current locations. It does require the purchase of a new site in Salina for this option, and of the 3 that we proposed. It does allow for the sale of the Marymount College campus So with regard to those three options, this is how they might fit. Obviously, if site D were selected, everything could fit on that site, and this is how it could be arranged on that site, again, for that $416.6 million. Kansas National Guard, again, a smaller site. We could accommodate many of the functions onto this site, and this is showing how those facilities might look on that site. But it does require a separate land area for the 3-mile driving course. And then finally, the KSU Salina site, again, can accommodate in a hybrid solution many of the programmed elements that we're proposing on that site, but would require a separate site for the driving course. Directly adjacent to the KSU Salina site, there is private land area directly adjacent. It's highlighted in red. And this shows how that driving course could be located on that adjacent land area. So in summary, again, if we were to look at site D, because it obviously could accommodate everything, this is how that site could be broken down into phases. And this is based on the priority level that KHP has. Dispatch Center has the highest priority at $24.9 million. Priority 2 is the Troop C headquarters and Troop S training and storage requirements, $26.8 million. Phase 3 would be relocating the training academy, which would be the large area to the right at $258 million. And then finally, the driving course being another $106.4 million, all totaling to the $416.6 million. With that, I'll open it to questions.
Yeah. Committee, any questions? Mr. Clues.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks for the presentation. I enjoyed going through this study. It really intrigued me. So I've got multiple, if that's okay. I noticed in the presentation today, though, you never made reference really to the Site C, the Salina Airport. That has, what, 50 acres and another additional 31, having access for helicopter and plane. Was there a reason that that wasn't looked into a little more? Or?
Well, we went through, again, as you can see on this slide, the scoring. I mean, it ranked 4th, so it's obviously close at 81% for its total. So I think it is an option that could be considered.
Okay.
But as we went through the scoring, it ranked lower than the other 3.
And then the current Marymount, is that like about 13 acres that it sits on?
I think it's about 27 acres, 27 to 30. Well, no, it's 16 acres.
So, yeah, I thought it was, okay. And that's where I was kind of curious with Site B being only 16 acres. But you said there may be more options for land on that one, or?
Well, so for both Site A and Site B, we feel that we can relocate the program elements for from the Marymount location to either one, but neither of those sites can accommodate the driving course. So additional land area would need to be secured for either of those 2 options. And we just, the area directly to the north of the airport that we show here would be available to either one if that was the choice.
Just a couple more?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. I like the Site D, but just curious if you could elaborate a little bit on the water area going through there and the flood.
So with any of the sites, this was a preliminary effort. A full study would have to be done to determine how we might mitigate or deal with some of the issues. We are concerned with Site D that there is a drainage area that go through it. We have talked to a civil engineer who feels that we could essentially build a bridge across the drainage area to allow the passage of the driving course over that.
So would that one, it's my understanding, that one in reading, that goes right by the highway, butts up to the highway, does it? 281 there or south?
I believe so, yes.
So would that need like a new ramp built to get access, or would you be using other, I just didn't know how that would factor in with KDOT and everything.
Well, I think we would, you could see how we planned on getting onto the site from essentially coming from the south. But again, that would be part of a future study to determine if this was the chosen site, how best to accommodate the traffic flow in and off the site.
Clarify one thing. That water well site, that is really adjacent north of a KDOT sub-area office where some of our assets are currently located, like the evidence facility. That water well road, of the 3 that were recommended, that is private property. And we have learned even since this study has been done that a portion of that has already been dedicated to a convenience store going in that area. So that's a process that had to be approved through the city government. That's how we became aware of this. But it does illustrate some timeliness to this aspect, that even as we are looking at these properties, some of them are already being used for other purposes. That's particularly challenging with private property. With the state properties, the Kansas National Guard site, the K-State Salina, we have a little more assurance of stability that, and knowing that those areas that we've identified are not unslated to be developed for other purposes. And your question about access from the I-70, I can't imagine that we would need any additional access to I-70 because these sit on the normal on-ramps. Our law enforcement assets use existing on-ramps to the interstate as it is, so I don't think this would require any additional reconfiguration of the highway or aspect.
Okay, that's good to know. Just maybe one last question, and sorry, I just have had quite a few. So for the 20 million for a new dispatch center, that would be located on the current training center, Marymount, updating it, correct?
No, the 24.9 million would be with any option that we potentially would proceed with. That is the cost of the construction of a new dispatch center. It could be on any location. It could be on the current Marymount College campus site, or it could be on one of the new sites that we're proposing.
Okay, so currently though, you're not proposing to do the dispatch center prior to doing one of these projects?
I don't believe so.
Yeah, so the report recommends option 2, 416 million. The agency, that's a significant, probably insurmountable number. So of that 416 million, we are requesting to pursue kind of the first 2 phases. If you talked about a phasing aspect, which would be like 24.9 million for the dispatch center, and then an additional 26 million for the Troop C headquarters. So yes, we would start those initial phases, and we're talking about relocating them off of the Marymount site and building them on one of these other 3 candidate sites. So that would be sort of the initial phase, acknowledging that those subsequent phases will still need to occur.
Because if you kept Marymount in the picture, or if you didn't, I would say you wouldn't want to put money into that kind of dollars and then land up moving somewhere else.
So the trick with this is if we do this in this phasing aspect, we will still have a training academy functioning on that Marymount campus for the near future, right? And probably for another 2 to 3, perhaps 4 years, we'll have to come back to request funding to relocate that aspect. So to answer your question is, there will still need to be an operational need. Unless we did this all for 416 million in the coming year or 2, there will be a need to maintain some aspects on that Marymount campus for the time being.
Okay, thank you. And thanks again for the study.
Senator Billinger.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question goes back to the airport. He mentioned that earlier. This is a city-owned property at the airport?
Hold on. So Site C,
Correct.
I assume it's the Airport Authority. I don't know the exact ownership, but I believe it's the Salina
How
Airport.
many acres are out there?
I don't know the total acreage that they own.
Are there runways that they don't use anymore that were, from World War II or whatever?
Yeah, the Salina Airport that we're talking about is the airport that sits on the west side of Salina. That's the former Schilling Air Force Base that's now been reconfigured for lots of different things, to include Kansas State University. The property we're talking about the property that they assessed sits south of that airport, and it's a total of 81 acres. The challenge with that property is there's two parcels, and they're not contiguous to each other. So you would have to array facilities on two slightly different pieces of property that are available. We've had some preliminary discussions with the Salina Airport, and they are even considering some larger development plans on the west side of that airport. But that is a municipal government. They would be charging a lease fee for anything that's built on that airport. We would own the buildings. Generally with airports, you own the buildings and you pay a lease for the property underneath them.
I just wondering, is just questions, because I know where the airport's at, but I didn't know how much land and what the possibilities there are. I mean, looks to me like when we're spending, what, $116 million on a road course,
I think it's 106 million, I think.
106, that's why I wondered. I thought, well, I knew that there was quite a little land around there, and I didn't know. I thought maybe an old runway there that you could use for a roadway course. I mean, that's, to me, that jumps out at me more than anything on this whole page. Or
Jump in and clarify very quickly. That K-State Salina and the Kansas National Guard are state property that sits adjacent to the airport. So they almost sit right up next to the edge of the airport. The airport is municipal property. So we have two pieces of state property that are on that list. So if we were to utilize that state property, it's likely there would be no cost for land acquisition, as opposed to if we were to build on the Waterwell site, which is private property that we would have to purchase, or even the Salina Airport, there would be costs associated with leasing the land. So I just wanted to clarify, sometimes that's a little bit confusing to understand whether the K-State Salina and that National Guard site sit adjacent to the airport, but they are existing state property.
right, I knew some were, but the Waterwell, for instance, is not. We have to write a check. So if this airport one was a better fit, we still have to write a check. It doesn't make a darn bit of difference which check you write to who.
So yep, just to clarify, you are exactly correct. If the Waterwell road site is private property, we would have to buy that from someone. The Salina Airport, so Site C in this option, that would have to be land that is leased, and we build on that land. The K-State Salina option or the Kansas National Guard is state property, so we would be building land on state property. From the agency's assessment, that's the best of all scenarios, is to build land on existing state property.
Correct, I understand that. I'm just saying that the state could also own the property at the airport. You'd have to buy it, but I'm sure that.
I would have to have conversations. That would be a matter of purchasing that land from the Salina Airport, which is a municipal government. And I can't speak to the availability of that.
I can't either, but I'm just assuming that, there's a price and there's an offer. So just curious, because to me, this road course is an issue. $106 million for a little road course. I think that's a hurdle.
Okay, further questions? All right. Is there someone else wanting to speak?
Mr. Chairman, I'm just going to wrap up a few things here, and I'm going to reference you to our testimony that was provided. It looks like this. Just as a reminder of why we are here today, so on January 29th, the Joint Committee requested this presentation on the Salina Campus Needs Assessment and recommended that the agency continue to work with the legislature to satisfy the Salina campus needs. The House Committee on Appropriations adopted that exact same recommendation on February 7th. We thank the committee for that recommendation, and we continue to look forward to it. This is an extraordinary once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for the Kansas Highway Patrol to configure our assets in Salina. Salina is really the operational heart of our agency. It is where our training academy is located, but it's where many more aspects are located. And I did want to clarify, the agency is not requesting to vacate the city of Salina. Sometimes people are confused about that. We are very satisfied with the city of Salina. It is the confluence of two major highways, which is always advantageous for the Highway Patrol, and its centrality works well for training when you have assets deployed across the entire state. Really, everyone can make it to that central location. Just wanted to talk quickly about the agency's recommendation. So, as Rick noted, the report analyzed 4 planning options and recommended planning option 2, partial configuration of KHP assets on a new campus. Agency concurs with that recommendation, but we acknowledge that amount of $416 million is probably insurmountable. So we are requesting up to $51.7 million SGF for the initial phases in that reconfiguration, and I'll speak to what those initial phases are. And we've talked about this, but the Highway Patrol, our assets in Salina include more than just the training academy. It's the dispatch center, central supply, Troop C headquarters, and all of those things are located on the former Marymount College. That college was built in 1922 to 1972, occupied by the Highway Patrol in 1994. It's a great university, right? A stunning campus. However, it has reached the end of its useful life, and it was never designed to be a law enforcement operational facility. Just as a reminder of why this proviso was even in the bill last year during the 2024 session, the governor recommended $10 million to construct and equip a new dispatch center on that KDOT property in South Salina. The legislature amended the governor's recommendation to provide a total of $20 million for a new dispatch center, indoor-outdoor firing range, and the purchase of 200 acres in Salina for growth on a consolidated campus. So this was in the appropriations bill last year. The governor vetoed that item, largely because the proposed amounts were difficult to substantiate at that time last year, and suggested a comprehensive assessment be conducted. And that is the assessment that you see here before you today. So I would just move you quickly on to the last page, page 3. As I noted, we're requesting $51.7 million for the initial steps in reconfiguration. That would be funding to support relocation of the dispatch center and the Troop C headquarters and Troop C facilities. So these are the law enforcement aspects of that whole project. The aspects that remain are the training academy, central supply, and the 3-mile driving course. So those are part of the academic or the training aspect. So we would request $51.7 million for the initial phase, and we would come back to the legislature in subsequent years to request funding for those other components. And we understand that driving course at $106.4 million is a significant lift, and it's challenging because it requires a significant amount of acreage. And for us, that item is probably among the least of priorities. The training center, the dispatch center, the troops headquarters are all of more significance. So I just wanted to make a note of that. And you'll see under the justification, why did we support option 2? It meets the agency's long-term needs, such as a suitable and safe dispatch center, which of all of this, the dispatch center is probably the most critical. Option 2 addresses security and force protection concerns unique to public safety agencies. That is the Marymount campus is unsecure. Traffic of both civilian travel on and off that campus, actually to reach residents in which parking is only available by crossing our campus. We have dispatch individuals that go there every day and are traveling or walking from a parking space to the dispatch center, and there's really nothing securing that site as they're moving. Option 2 begins relocation off the former Marymount campus. So that's probably the real trick of this is there's many public safety aspects and state agencies in the city of Salina. They are all located on the west side out by the airport. We are located on the Marymount campus on the east side in a residential neighborhood far from access to main highways. The the three recommended sites place KHP assets among other state agencies in West Salina, such as KSU Salina, Kansas National Guard, KDOT, which affords partnership opportunities and potential shared resources. So moving forward, should this request of $51.7 million be approved, the agency would enter into formal discussions with K-State Salina, Kansas National Guard, or KDOT concerning land use and shared resources such as utilities, maintenance, parking, to reduce those project costs. And we would gather appraisals for the sale of the Marymount College campus, which stands to offset some of these costs. And we would also examine the non-construction costs associated with the estimates in that assessment to see if there are certain aspects that might be suitable for federal grant funding or even congressional directed spending. No, please note that those grants would never support the entire aspect of this project, but they might be able to support elements of a project. So for an example, in a dispatch center, it may be that a federal grant can support some of the equipment that would go, the communications equipment that would go into that dispatch center. But it's hard for us to pursue any of those grants until we have some indication from the legislature or state government of commitment to this project. So that concludes kind of the rundown of the agency's perspective, and I would be happy to stand for questions, Mr.
No, that helped a bunch. I appreciate that. Any questions from Earl or anybody else in here? Not seeing any. Thank you. Thank you for coming over. And I assume nobody else is wanting to speak at this point, so, okay. It's nice having the multiple options here versus just we want this new building and no other options here. So I think that's going to help. And I know we're going to hear this later on in transportation today. So, and I look forward to being in there with that. So, all right, let's keep in touch and see what we can do to maybe help this move forward. Thank you. Anything else from the committee? Not seeing any. There is lunches out there now. Sorry that it was late, but let's go out and grab some. They're out there waiting for you.